What person or job title holds far more power and influence than most people realize? The secretary for any higher level executive. Related important fact for college students, the dean's secretary can sign things, and it's literally treated as if the dean themselves signed it, and the dean's signature can resolve 95% of any bureaucratic bullet you happen to encounter. You missed a registration deadline because the online system shat itself for 6 hours. Dean's secretary's signature overrides the deadline. You're now in the class. Your advisor told you a class satisfied a requirement but then you found out it didn't. Dean's secretary's signature. The class counts. You can't reach your advisor because he's on sabbatical in Australia for 6 months and he doesn't check his email. You have a new advisor this semester. It's the dean's secretary. You change your mind at the last minute and want to get into the films of Hitchcock class with Professor Isaiah, but the waitlist is 4 miles long and you graduate this semester so you won't get another chance. The dean's secretary can't take a look to see if anything can be done. She'll get back to you by next week. Later that day, you're moved to the front of the waitlist. And coincidentally the professor has decided that due to high demand they are increasing the class size by a few spots. The previous room wouldn't accommodate that. But apparently it seems a larger room was found somehow. Please check your email for the new room assignment. We apologize for the inconvenience. The moral of the story is be polite and friendly with everyone you meet. The guy who checks documents for people entering a country. Glory to Ostotska. In Texas, the railroad commissioner is also the top regulator for oil and gas in the state. Your local city council member probably has more influence on your day-to-day life than the president ever will. Producers for children's shows. They're practically pushing their own views and opinions on the new generation of kids to a far greater extent than their parents and teachers are capable of. Secretary. The boss is in charge, but the secretary sets the schedule, decides who sees them, takes the notes, takes the calls, answers the emails, decides who gets to even talk to the boss, and has enormous influence on them. The secretary gets 40+ hours a week with the boss. You likely don't even get 40 minutes a month. A secretary on your side can get things to happen. A secretary who hates you will ensure you are buried. Auditors. They conduct your audit up. They are a special breed of people whose goal in life is to look at data and find irregularities. My uncle was an auditor for defense and foreign trade. He'd fact-check casual conversations as we had them. He was fact-checking and auditing at his own son's wedding. Though if you ever wanted to know the best price on power companies or plane tickets, he was the guy to ask. Edit. As this is the post-smartphone world, the man always carried a tablet with him to check things. He'd not trap you with mistakes in casual converse. He just loved knowing the current truth. He was an internal auditor who generally found out when accountants had been cooking the books. He had testified in court a few times too. That would make him sad, as most of the time drugs or gambling made people cook the books. Park rangers. They are federal law enforcement officers. Prosecutors. They decide what charges, if any, are going to be brought to court. Whoever the top person in your organization is, their assistant. They control so much. Janitors. Man, my old job didn't realize how important they were until one of them quit and the only janitor left took a day off. The janitor is a surprisingly integral part of an office. It's like the colon of the company. You don't think about it, but if it stopped working, everything would shut down very quickly. Anyone who works in regular infrastructure like goods transportation or waste disposal. Imagine if stores were all of a sudden out of food because the delivery companies went on strike. Most IT workers could straight up torpedo a company and cause serious, potentially permanent damage if they really wanted to, depending on how much access they have. But a senior IT professional could straight up ruin a company. Yes, they would get caught fairly quickly and likely face substantial consequences. But if the right guy was angry enough and just wanted to see the world burn, you'd have a serious crisis on your hands in a matter of hours or less. Assistants to the regional manager. They might not hold power in the traditional sense, but I think Ryan Reynolds said it well in the movie Waiting. Never duck with the people who handle your food. Flight attendants. At least in the US. post 9/11 flight attendants can get you hauled out of your seat and questioned by federal law enforcement. Interfering with the flight crew can be a heavy charge to face. Pharmacist. Yes, your doctor wrote the prescription, but your doctor wrote a strength frequency drug that will kill you, so no. We're not filling it, and we're calling your doctor to let them know they should avoid trying to kill their patients. Receptionists. Office coordinator. Other fancy terminology. They see everything. They hear everything. They really are, and can be, the most powerful people in the office. They have the schedule. They know how their new person arriving for an interview is acting, and they also occasionally see shenanigans in the lobby right outside the door of the employees. The network admins engineers. Everyone thinks we're glorified help desk or reclusive trolls. The latter may be true. Nobody realizes we can see everything the average users do on our network, everything you do on your work machine, and everything you do online using your phone on our Wi-Fi. At my company the policy is, more than we can review all computer usage at any time for any reason. Unofficially our policy is, more than don't give us a reason to look and we won't. We have better things to do. The local authority department for planning, building and construction. They basically decide single-handed on building zones, residential areas, new road systems and more. And due to the many grey area regulations they can sign off and agree on, they hold all the power of you being able to build your home, or if the multi-million-dollar deal for a new hotel plus casino in this protected wildlife area just is signed off. So OFC, there is no reason for worries. They are working morally correct all the time and never come up with being corrupt. Accountant. We have the knowledge of how well or unwell a business is doing at any given moment. We control the money. A prostitute. At some point they'll have a D in their mouth, and as long as they have teeth they can decide the future of that man right then and there. If that isn't power, then what is? The IT guys always end up knowing far more than they should, and a lot of them end up being treated badly if someone is already annoyed at their computer not working properly. It's especially true if you're in a small business and one or two guys, maybe the entire IT department. They could know everyone in the company's login details. Teachers. They have the most influence on impressionable kids in the developmental stages. Yuri Bezmenov, an ex-Soviet propagandist, says the best way to demoralize a nation is through the education system. This is why it takes about 15-20 years, the average school career, to change the political climate in a nation. Edit, spelling and source, this interview. Law clerks. They are basically real-life judicial consigliers. You won't see them in the courtroom, but they advise judges of the law, recommend outcomes and often write the judges' decisions. A number of the judges in my appellate court don't even bother to read a party's papers if they trust their law clerk's recommendation on a case. For all the power, most non-lawyers don't know that the job exists, even though they exercise tremendous power over the outcome of cases in all courts, including the US Supreme Court. The Supreme Court. Congress is the most powerful branch, but there are so many cooks in the kitchen that it can rarely fully exercise that power. The Supreme Court is the only branch of government regularly creating new constitutional law. It takes monumental levels of agreement to amend the Constitution directly, but if just 5 people on the Supreme Court can agree on something, they can effectively alter or extend the meaning of it. Usually it's in smaller ways than a straight up amendment, but sometimes it's something just as profoundly consequential. District Attorney. When I was appointed a deputy DA, I was astonished at the power I had to just mess with people. I had essentially free reign. The only governor on my amazing powers was the caseload. I had no time to be a persecutor or tyrant. I could barely keep up with what the local people were bringing me. That may be on purpose. Seems to be the case with deputy DAs everywhere. In my case, I was a deputy DA in a rural district. I was 65 miles from the DA, and he didn't want to hear from me or about me, especially not from the local county commissioners and sheriffs. I was on my own. I just didn't have time to terrorize the innocent, but I could have. So many laws, so many ways to violate them, such broad statutory authority to duck with people. People of the Hoa, duckers. The US Solicitor General. They are often referred to as the 10th Justice since the Supreme Court lends a great deal of credence to their amicus briefs filed in other cases. Small town police officers, specifically those on patrol, they can basically do whatever they want because on the rare occasion something does happen, they all jump on it because they have nothing better to do. With power comes responsibility, and a bored person with power is somewhat of a risk. That, and word gets around quickly if Uncle John gets caught drinking and driving. Not a specific title, but at every factory I've ever worked at there is always one lady, and for me it's always been a lady, who knows how to do every oddball thing that comes up. They typically have a low-level position, but are also this catch-all for bizarre extra jobs. They have their it together and manage way more than meets the eye. They are the ones that truest keep places running, not management. My wife is a nurse practitioner. Patients people in general in her ER have no idea that her title is only one step down from the doctor. NPs end up doing nearly equal work except for making the executive decisions like surgery or prescribing very serious and controlled medications. If an NP sees you in the ER, you're in good hands. Trust me. Don't itch and moan about who are you? I wanna see the doctor. System admins at small to medium-sized companies. Typically in larger companies there will be small teams that run different departments within the IT infrastructure. But at smaller companies there may only be a handful if that who run the IT dept, and they have access to everything in the system. I've accidentally found way more info than I should have, including the HR spreadsheet with everyone's salary and bonuses, although that helped me when negotiating my salary when I was promoted to my current position. The Fire Marshal. The marshal part of the title isn't figurative. They are law enforcement officers. If they decide your building isn't where they want it to be compliance-wise, they can shut it down and chain the doors, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it until they're satisfied. That's usually the nuclear option, though not the first move. Most tend to be pretty reasonable and will work with you and give you time to fix infractions as long as they're confident you're actually working on it. Piss them off though and they can make your life hell. Source: I'm commercial fire alarm technician. The person that cuts your hair. You ever tried to go out in public or work with a terrible haircut? They make you awkward looking or attractive. A chief master sergeant can and in some cases will tear open a time warp in a lieutenant's arsehole despite the officer being higher ranking. Nobody ducks with a chief. Security personnel. Whenever I work at a place with security guards I treat them like gods, because if there's a reason to have security guards, you are going to want to have them on your side when it goes down. Maintenance. Particularly on the shop floor when a job has to be put the door by 1200 and the machine breaks down at 1100. The old boy who works maintenance at our place is a gem. Randomly mentioned how irritating a particular task was. 2 days later he built a jig specially for me. He didn't have to. It's not part of his job. But he decided to make my life easier. Top bloke. Apparently anyone in the top tier levels of the telecoms industry, the true shot callers, that industry straight up pulled the mat from underneath millions upon millions of Americans in terms of net neutrality, and most don't even know what that means. They will soon enough, but it's seeming to be already too late. Oh, and the fact that Verizon took a multi-million-dollar infrastructure deal with the government and did nothing but steal money because they never updated the infrastructure. So essentially what I'm seeing here is if you're too big to fall, you're too big to go to jail. Administrative assistants who work for large companies or VIPs. They do everything from plan every facet of business trips to order birthday and anniversary gifts for the VIPs so's to run payroll for everyone in the division. If they are the office manager as well as the administrative assistant, they essentially control the daily work lives of everyone in their office and can make them really, really happy, or really, really miserable. They can also get a vendor or salesperson's foot in the door, determine who will be invited to important meetings and keep everyone's dirty little secrets. UPS drivers. I was once a seasonal helper for one. Around Christmas time when they need the extra hands, all helpers were given the brown pants and a brown button down with the UPS badge in the chest. During training, the trainer was insistent that we return the uniform when the seasonal work concluded. He even went as far to say that if they were not returned, the police would show up at your house to retrieve it. Reason being, people will let UPS drivers go anywhere. Not many people could walk into a bank and casually stroll behind the counter. Yet you wouldn't see anyone stop a UPS driver from doing so. We visited a bank every day and I'd generally walk in, reach over the glass divider at the front desk, and just take packages. Plus, I heard a story of a UPS driver being pulled over while drunk in his personal car. When the cop saw his uniform, he offered to drive the guy home instead of arresting him. The next morning, the cop went to his house, picked him up and took him to pick up his car. Man, those guys can get away with everything. Assistant regional manager of a small paper company. Since it's not listed, it seems people really don't know this, but the recruiter you deal with when you apply for a job is literally the gatekeeper to your prosperity. Should you be in a position to need that job, no matter how skilled you are, if they don't like you, you're not passing go. Physician's assistants. The guys I work with know just about as much as hand surgery as I do. They just don't have an MD. I trust them just like I'd trust another doctor, and I take their advice fairly often. When I interview people for jobs at my practice, I check to see what the PAs think of them. If a doctor spoke down to one of the PAs, they will not get hired.